Risk models weren't built for interconnected infrastructure. Enterprise risk models were built around discrete categories: energy risk, supply chain risk, cyber risk, water risk, physical asset risk. Those categories are increasingly converging. Grid instability affects water treatment. Water scarcity constrains data center cooling. Telecommunications outages impair grid management. Port disruptions stall fuel flows that stabilize power markets. The vulnerability is no longer individual infrastructure weakness. It is infrastructure interdependence, and most enterprise risk frameworks were not designed to quantify it. The U.S. Aging systems, rising stress, compounding exposure. The American Society of Civil Engineers continues to grade U.S. infrastructure at C, citing an investment gap exceeding $2.5 trillion over the next decade across energy, water, transportation, and broadband systems. At the same time, stress indicators are increasing. The U.S. experienced 28 separate billion-dollar weather disasters in 2023, according to NOAA, among the highest totals recorded. The Department of Energy, DOE, projects electricity demand from data centers could double or even triple by 2030, driven largely by AI and digital workloads. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, estimates roughly 9 million lead service lines remain in U.S. drinking water systems, requiring large-scale replacement. Grid outage duration has trended upward in multiple regions as extreme heat, wildfire, and storm intensity rise. Each of these statistics matters. But what elevates enterprise risk is their overlap. Data centers depend on continuous electricity and substantial water for cooling. Water utilities depend on electricity for pumping and treatment. Transportation systems depend on fuel supply chains tied to pipeline and grid reliability. Infrastructure is no longer parallel. It is layered. Europe. Energy interdependence. Repriced entire economies. The European energy crisis following Russia's invasion of Ukraine illustrated how quickly infrastructure interdependence can shift from operational issue to macroeconomic shock. Wholesale electricity prices increased more than tenfold in some European markets during 2022 to 2023, as gas supply disruption cascaded into power generation and industrial output. In 2022, Europe increased LNG imports by over 60% in 1 year, requiring rapid expansion of regasification terminals, pipeline reversals, and storage infrastructure. Energy dependency translated into industrial production declines in energy-intensive sectors, government fiscal intervention to stabilize markets, margin compression across manufacturing and chemicals. Infrastructure interdependence became geopolitical leverage and corporate financial exposure. Asia-Pacific, climate and density intensify coupling. China and India both recorded record electricity demand peaks during extreme heat waves in 2023 and 2024. Localized power rationing in parts of China affected industrial output and export supply chains. Simultaneously, the World Bank estimates global water demand could exceed supply by 40% by 2030, affecting power generation, heavy industry, and agriculture. Japan's repeated typhoon disruptions underscore another dimension. Transportation, power distribution, and manufacturing output are tightly synchronized in export-driven economies. When one node pauses, the ripple is global. What does this all mean for CFOs? For finance leaders, the shift is structural. Traditional risk modeling often treats exposures independently. Energy price volatility, physical asset damage, supply chain disruption, regulatory compliance cost, infrastructure interdependence increases the probability that these risks occur simultaneously. Revenue timing risk. A regional grid outage can halt production, interrupt digital systems, and delay outbound shipments at once, affecting quarterly earnings recognition. Working capital pressure. Transportation disruptions tied to fuel or port instability can extend inventory cycles and increase financing costs. Insurance market tightening. Global reinsurance markets have narrowed catastrophe coverage and increased deductibles in climate-exposed regions. Correlated losses are harder to model and more expensive to insure. Credit sensitivity. Rating agencies increasingly embed physical climate and infrastructure resilience considerations into assessments of utilities, real estate portfolios, logistics operators, and data center developers. Asset impairment exposure. Infrastructure-dependent facilities may face higher impairment risk if grid or water reliability deteriorates structurally rather than episodically. The financial consequence is not just higher cost, it is thinner margins, greater volatility sensitivity, and repriced regional exposure. Correlation changes the loss curve. When risks are independent, losses are contained. When risks are correlated, loss distributions widen. A storm that disrupts electricity, telecommunications, and transportation simultaneously does not triple enterprise impact, it multiplies it. In high-density industrial regions, many recent extreme weather events have affected multiple critical infrastructure sectors at once. The result is cascading downtime across production, logistics, and digital systems. Infrastructure interdependence increases the likelihood that physical disruption triggers digital outage. Digital outage halts operations. Operational pause triggers contractual penalties. Contractual penalties impact earnings. Risk frameworks built on containment assumptions may understate cascading exposure. Digital infrastructure is now part of the physical risk web. The expansion of cloud computing, AI workloads, and distributed operations further tightens infrastructure coupling. Data centers rely on stable grid access, continuous water supply, fiber connectivity, transportation for equipment deployment. Grid operators increasingly rely on digital communications and automated control systems. Water utilities depend on networked supervisory systems. Telecommunications networks depend on uninterrupted power. The digital layer amplifies interdependence. A cyber event can trigger physical consequences. A physical event can trigger digital downtime. The distinction between IT risk and infrastructure risk is narrowing. Capital allocation is now a risk decision. Redundant power feeds, on-site generation, diversified water sourcing, redundant fiber pathways, and geographic distribution have traditionally been evaluated as cost centers. The strategic question for executive teams in 2026 is not, can we afford redundancy? It is, can we afford correlated failure? What boards should be asking now? Infrastructure oversight should reflect interdependence. Executive teams should examine, where are our single-point infrastructure dependencies? Do our risk models treat energy, water, transport, and digital exposure independently? Have we modeled simultaneous disruption scenarios? How concentrated are our facilities in shared infrastructure corridors? Are resilience investments framed as cost avoidance or exposure mitigation? Enterprises that treat infrastructure as a static utility input may find that cascading failures carry consequences far beyond temporary downtime, extending into revenue volatility, credit exposure, and capital allocation pressure. Risk models built for isolated disruption are being tested by interconnected reality. You've been listening to Sustainability Soundbites by Environment and Energy Leader. For partnership opportunities, please reach out to our team.